Hello and welcome to episode 142 of The Thing About Golf, Golf Australia magazine's ongoing quest to nail down just what it is that gets people so hooked on this game. There are many actors in the grand theatre that is golf, and among them are those who chronicle the game. But what is the job of the writers and podcasters and reporters who find and bring us stories about golf? From the top end of town to the local public course, what influence, if any, do these people exert? And who exactly are they? Having been part of that world for much of my life, I've been lucky and privileged to get to know some of the best in what we call the business. So, to help answer the question, who are they, I like, from time to time, to bring in some of what I consider to be the best at the craft and find out what makes them tick. Episode 142 features just such a guest. Bill Fields is a multiple award winner not only for his golf writing, but also golf photography. He knows and loves the game as passionately as anyone I've ever encountered, and he writes beautifully about it. There's lots in this interview about golf and why it means so much to people, but there's plenty about other stuff too, like writing and media and the difference between a print magazine and an online one. I found it insightful and thought-provoking, and I hope that you do also. Well, the first thing we have to say, as we always do, is thank you for taking the time, Bill Fields. The thing about golf is quite a commitment. It's very kind of you to do so.
Oh, well, it's always a pleasure to chat with you, Rod. Thanks for having me on.
Well, you say that. Let's see how you feel by the end of this. We're going to start, Bill, where we always do. The clue is in the title. What's the thing about golf for Bill Fields?
Well, it's a fascinating subject, game, sport. We can never figure it out if we're talking about playing it, and I'm still trying to figure out how to write well about it. I used to try to figure out how to take good photographs of it. So it's been a big part of my life for a long time.
There's something elusive about golf, isn't there? I often think of it in these terms. Golf's a journey, not a destination. We never get there, do we? There's something elusive about golf, which might tie into some elusive things about photography and writing. But what about the elusive nature of golf?
Oh, for sure. How many times have any of us gone out, played for us a great round of golf, whether it was breaking 80 or breaking 90 or the one time many moons ago that I broke 70. I mean, when it seems easy, and then the next day, not so much. It's just the way it's that way for us mere mortals, and it's that way for the tour pros. Scotty Scheffler, perhaps accepted the last couple of years.
We'll come to Scheffler and perhaps McIlroy and a few other things a bit later, but what an extraordinary display of golf he's put on for us in the last few weeks, Scotty Scheffler. I've not seen anything like it since Tiger. I know a lot of people have been saying I'm not comparing him to Tiger, but I've not seen anything like it since Tiger. What's your take?
Very impressive. Early in the year, he did not have a win. Some people were even, hey, what's happened to him? He's done. He's in a slump. McIlroy wins the Masters in dramatic style, becomes the focus of the men's game. And then wham, Scheffler's now won, 3 times very quickly, looking every bit as dominant as he did the previous couple of years. He just seems to have a great attitude and work ethic. He seems unbothered by all the stuff that goes around being the number one player in the world. And as you know, all players in golf's history have not felt that way, and it's hurt them. And so far, at least for Scheffler, who's 28 now, he seems to just go about his business, and he hits pin-high shots that echo what Jack did and what Tiger did. It's really fun to watch.
It's his bad golf is really good, I think is how I'd say it. Like when he doesn't play, he wasn't playing his best and he won the PGA. He wasn't playing his best. He was top 5 at the Masters. That's where I feel like I draw the correlation with Tiger. He turns rounds of 75 into 72, 71, or sometimes even 70.
Tiger did that magnificently. Jack did that. I remember speaking to Judy Rankin, whom you probably had on your show before, great women's player and observer of the game, later on. And she said, Jack, he didn't hit a shot that he wasn't trying 100% on. And Tiger was the same. And I think Scotty might be the same. And that's really hard to do. You can talk about doing it, but actually doing it is very difficult.
Yeah. Interesting. I read somewhere, I'm sure it's not the only advice Tiger's given to his son, but the main piece of advice apparently he's given to Charlie is the only shot that counts in this game is the next one.
Right.
It's really quite telling, isn't it? It's a simple statement, but it's like everything in golf, easier said than done, but it's very telling, isn't it, that that's the most important thing in golf.
It is, and sports psychologists or mental coaches have used a lot of words and time over the years trying to get that message to their pupils. But as you say, very very much easier to say than to do. And Scheffler's doing a great job of doing it, as his recent play, his play over the last several years indicates.
Yeah, absolutely. We forget it's only been quite recent that he's appeared on the scene. Let's move away from that for just a minute. Bill, what about your own golf? Tell me a bit about your own golf story. How did you come to the game? What sort of level did you play to? What's the backstory? I know you came from sort of North Carolina for you.
That's right. I was actually born in the hospital in Pinehurst. About as the crow flies. About a mile or two from Pinehurst number 2. Wow. I did not come from a golf family. I got into the game kind of by osmosis. You live in that area and you're a sports mad kid. You kind of see people playing golf, and I did pick it up. I got a single putter, and then I bought an iron, and then I eventually got a starter set of 7 clubs when I was for Christmas when I was 10, and then just really got into the game as a teenager and really tried to become a player. Never really got there. As I said, I broke 70 once. I was a mid 70s to, low 80s player, despite playing a lot and loving it. And I wouldn't trade it for anything. It was a great experience. But that's how I started in the game, as a player.
Now, despite being born, as you say, quite close to it, I'm sure your golf didn't start at Pinehurst number 2. We know that Pinehurst is kind of the seat of American golf. It's the real birthplace of American golf in so many ways, and such fabulous golf there. But where did you start playing? I'm interested in this because I think it's got broader implications. How people come to the game, particularly from a non-golf family. We need to tap that in golf if we're going to keep getting players.
For sure. And it's interesting. I'm working, finishing up a memoir right now called A Quick 9 Before Dark, which kind of harkens back to those teenage days, trying to fit in as much golf as you could before the sun goes down. And I've obviously been reflecting a lot on my youth. And but I started playing in my yard. I literally, like other people, I'm sure, you sink 10 cans into the yard and you putt or chip to them. That's where I started out. And then I moved to there was a public field several blocks from my house. And, that's where I probably hit my first full shots. And then, went to a 9-hole course that happily is still in existence, called Knollwood Fairways in Southern Pines, North Carolina, just down the road from Pinehurst. And, played, hundreds of rounds there. That's where I got my start.
That'll be recognisable to many people in golf, I suspect. Did you, like our mutual friend and colleague John Huggan, design your own golf course down at that local park in your mind? He told me he had something similar. I think he had to hit it over the swings one way, he had to hit it through the swings another way. There were all these little tests. Were you drawn to the game that way, the challenges and how you could make them interesting?
Well, when I did sort of expand the course in air quotes in my yard. From the very backyard to the broader yard, I would there were 2 holes, one near where we sort of had a vegetable garden in the summer, and one down by the street near a little fall off, and that was one cup, and the other cup was up near the garden area, and there was about 35, 40 yards, I guess, and then that was there were some branches. When I got my dad into the game, he wasn't a wedge guy. He was more of a bump and run guy. He would hit under the branches. I would try to go over the branches. So, we had so much fun. And that's just, that's how, as I've been, reflecting on all this stuff, writing the book, it really makes me think that golf in some ways has gotten so technical. And I know some people are attracted by the gizmos. A lot of the young people are attracted by the distance measuring devices and the launch monitors. But my goodness, when you boil it down, I think most of us got into it because it's a ball and a stick, and it's simple, or at least it can be.
It's so simple even a child could explain it, Bill, and yet I am a grown man who has devoted far too much of my life to trying to figure it out, both in print. There's something about it. Are you an other sport guy? And is there another sport that somehow you feel the same way, or there's any sort of parallels with golf? I'm always intrigued with this because I'm not. No other sport interests me.
No, I definitely have interest in other sports, and I really did as a kid. If you don't grow up in North Carolina in the era when I did, without loving college basketball, that was kind of our thing. That was our regional delicacy. Everybody, or most everybody, was into it. And I loved basketball more than golf initially, and I tried to make the teams. I just wasn't that skilled, but I certainly had a passion for it. I played Little League baseball, and then sort of funneled my attention into golf. But no, I now I don't. I did pay more attention to tennis, I guess, when there was a different eras of players. Even going back to Sampras and Agassi, that's probably the last era. But of course, Federer and Nadal, hard not to pay attention to those guys, given how dominant they were. But no, I definitely interested in other sports. I'll pay more attention to the NBA during playoffs time. But yeah, golf's been a focus for a long time.
There's a tribal element to being a team sport fan, I think, the NBA that you talk about. I'm sure you had a team that you support right from the start to wherever they end up. That doesn't exist in golf. So what is it that drives the golf fan? What are we looking for? You can't be tribal with golf because it's an individual pursuit, except come Ryder Cup time, which I'm sure will be particularly spicy this year in New York.
Yeah, everybody's looking ahead to that with excitement and perhaps a little
trepidation.
You just hope that,
Bill, yes.
You just hope that it doesn't get out of hand with the New York fans. Out on Long Island, which is about 75 miles from where I'm talking to you today. No, you're right. Fans have their favorite players, but it's not like, I'm a longtime Washington Commanders football fan, U.S. football.
Will anybody laugh at you about that, Bill?
They finally had a good season last year after many years in the gutter. So it was great. But yeah, there's some long-suffering sports fans if you happen to have an allegiance to the wrong team. But yeah, golf, you can just kind of pick who you like and follow them. I think, it's crazy how many people are into the betting aspect now, particularly younger people. I have a young pal, and, he's not this way, but he says a lot of his friends will not watch a golf tournament unless they've got some money on something. And I just find that odd. I never really was a punter like that, but it's definitely become more popular with the ease of betting now over here in America now.
There's something a bit cautionary about that, is there not, Bill, for the game? And I guess here I talk more about the recreational game, because what you're creating there is a faux fan base. They're not actually interested in the golf, they're interested in the result. And I feel the same way about the tournament in Phoenix. I don't speak against the fun and whatnot that people have, but it feels like most people there at that Phoenix Open are not there for the golf. I wonder if golf ultimately benefits beyond just the week of that tournament.
I think the gambling aspect is something to keep an eye on. I'd be shocked if there wasn't some kind of a scandal, at least a minimum scandal in golf, in pro golf. I think, it just seems like it's only a matter of time. There have been, basketball players that have been, caught up in it, and other sports. Yeah, it's kind of sad that you can't just watch a game just for the game's sake, but it's just the way some of the world has evolved. The Phoenix thing, Scottsdale, I was there 2 years ago, and I think that was the year when they realized it had kind of gone over the line for a couple of reasons, and they did, I believe, dial it back earlier this year. And to their credit, I think they needed to, or even had to, and they did. I think you want people to have a good time. You don't want it to be all about the drink, as you all would put it. And I think it's a huge thing. They raise a lot of money for charity, but you gotta keep it under control to some degree.
Yeah, not to pontificate too much, Bill, but no, it's not football, people. Which is interesting. That talks to the game's image, doesn't it? You could imagine golfers saying that. I've probably said it myself almost without the, come on, guys, it's not the footy. There's something about golf. It's got a different image, isn't it? Among sports fans as well.
It does. And I think, it seems like the U.S. Masters has drawn, a lot more attention and popularity, in the last decade or so. And I'm not so sure that a reason is because it has sort of maintained its
Mm.
gentility, if you will. They don't allow cell phones. Everybody's not taking a picture of the action.
But you've lost my picture there, Bill. That's my fault. My camera's turned
Oh,
itself off. You might.
oh,
Do you
okay.
mind if I
I
just
was
leave it?
checking.
I can turn it back on if you like.
No, it's fine.
Okay.
It's fine.
Thanks.
Uh,
You're talking about
yeah,
the Masters.
yeah. I think the Masters, which it seems to be enjoying, the most popularity it's ever had. Interestingly, it doesn't allow cell phones. It is more old school. It's almost while certainly the tournament itself and many people are all over social media about it. That there are some throwback aspects to what goes on at Augusta, and people seem to like that. So I would think there might be a lesson there for some other venues and tournaments. But you wonder if everywhere else the cell phone is it's part of the deal, and it's just the way people experience sporting events now.
It's funny you should say that about the Masters, Bill. I recall Jeff Ogilvy saying on one of our other podcasts, I think it was State of the Game, he said that every year all the tournament directors from across the PGA Tour and many places in the world come to Augusta National, and they're blown away by the amazing experience and everything about it. They all go back to their own tournaments and do the exact opposite.
Yeah, it's a great point. I mean, yeah. and okay, I know we're all wedded to our phones now. It's part of our daily lives. I mean, but they do have phones on the ground, hardline phones that that people can use if they need to make a call. I was reminded of that this year when a friend of mine did just that. He didn't have his phone on the course. He was able to make a call, which is, that's kind of good, cool. You can still get in touch with somebody if you have to,
Bill.
but yet it doesn't just become the focus of the event.
I want to know how your friend remembered the number to call without his phone to look up the number that he needed to call.
Well, I guess he thought in advance, and maybe it was a familiar number. Yeah, that's right. A lot of times we don't know people's numbers now like we used to. There are numbers going back 40 years that I can remember because there was in the phone book or whatever. Yeah. But now it's just you have your contacts and you go it that way. But yeah, you look at pictures from Augusta and you see people watching the golf. It just has it's the only place now where scenes look like that, which is kind of sad.
Well, I think we've all seen the pictures. There's been more than one story about it. You'll see a photo of an iconic sports moment, and you see this particularly in golf, and there's an entire crowd, and you can't see a single face. They're all hidden behind phones filming it.
Yeah, it's weird.
And they're going to go and show their friends, say, hey, I was here for this moment. I didn't see it because I was watching it on my phone. I might as well have been at home watching it on the TV on the phone. It's odd, isn't it? I wonder though, Bill, I will say in defense of young people, if you've grown up in a world where the phone is ubiquitous, which it has been for nearly 20 years, I completely understand why you are attached to it, because I'm attached to mine far too much and I didn't grow up with one. And that's, it's the sixth most used function on the phone apparently is phone calls. It's not a phone.
Yeah, wow.
It's the wrong name for it. It's not a phone. Yeah. It really is. Yeah. It's a million other things before it's a phone.
And I was out at the U.S. Women's Open last week working for NBC. I'm a researcher on some of their telecasts, and the hotel was a bit of a drive from the course from Erin Hills, and it was kind of rural roads. And of course, we punch in the address, and but it just got me thinking. It's like, when's the last time any of us used a road map, highway map?
They've probably stopped making cars built with those little pockets behind the front seat, which is where the street directory used to live. And when you needed to go somewhere, you took it out and you went across the pages and you had a look at it. There's people who'd have no idea what we're talking about.
I remember specifically the last time I purchased a map. I was out in Nebraska, in Midwestern United States. It was 2013. I was out there to cover a golf tournament, the U.S. Senior Open, but I said, you know what? I'm going to make a point of, after the day is done, I'm going to drive to see as many sand green golf courses as I can. And these things are out in really rural areas, and there was no cell reception. So I I was navigating by a highway atlas, and that was the last time I really relied on the old school way.
Yeah, maps don't talk to you, youngins. They don't sit in the passenger seat and say, in 120 yards, turn left. Not
you think back as being a kid, your dad's driving, you're in the back seat, you got one of those gas station maps folded out, trying to help him go, and he's frustrated. I mean, how many times did we all do that?
Oh dear, yes, the good old days, as we call them, Bill. You mentioned being a kid there, and I wanted to go back to this because I know that there are two passions that we share. One is golf, and the other is news, magazines, newspapers, newsprint, ink. We've talked about this very briefly before. As a child, you were a bit of a newspaper hound, if I remembered that correctly. And for those, and there's a generation who will probably never read a physical newspaper, but for those who've maybe forgotten what it was like, what was the appeal? What was your newspaper?
I totally was, Rod, and I wasn't alone. But I remember, aside from little books that your mom might read to you, or you get as a picture books with limited. I mean, we got a morning paper. We got the Greensboro, North Carolina paper delivered. Our sort of Pinehurst area. It was either people got the Raleigh paper, the Fayetteville paper, the Charlotte paper, or the Greensboro. We were a Greensboro family for whatever reason. So every morning that paper would be rolled up in our driveway. And, I started, looking at it probably when I was 4 or 5 years old with my dad at the kitchen table. Mm-hmm. And, it started from there. And when I went to college at University of North Carolina in Chapel Hill, I mean, one of the great treats I had while going to school was going over to our the main library in the periodicals room and just spending several hours every week just reading all these a handful of great papers from across the United States, whether it was Miami, Los Angeles, New York, just to try to not only just to keep up, but to try to learn how are these great journalists doing their job. And now of course you have that at the click of a button on your laptop, but back then, that was the only way to absorb was in a library. These papers from these different locations.
Yeah, you think about how the world's changed, Bill. I listen to radio from England live on my phone here quite often while I'm cooking dinner. There's a radio show that I like that broadcasts in England. I listen to it right here in Sydney. It's extraordinary.
Well, I loved the radio as a kid growing up. I would try to tune in AM stations at night from different cities in America. St. Louis had a strong signal, Chicago, New Orleans, Nashville. I mean, I love trying to tune into these places that I hadn't visited by that point. And it had an exotic feel about it. I loved it.
There's a wondrousness that's childlike about that I think we have lost in the digital age. There's not much wonder left, is there, in a digital age when almost everything is available to you, literally immediately.
And I can remember even having a shortwave radio, a small one in the 80s, early 90s, and just trying to dial that thing in to to get you get a station in wherever it might be around the world, then it would go away. It was just. It was not guaranteed, let's say.
Don't take this the wrong way, Bill, but you're a certified nerd, my friend, which is fantastic. The physical newspaper itself, Bill, I feel like we've lost something with both books and newspapers. It's a different reading experience. Things that are backlit are not the same. What was it about the newspaper itself? And I'm going to ask you an odd question here. You might be one of the other few people in the world who might be able to remember this. Do you remember the first time you got your own fresh newspaper that nobody had yet read and you got to open and unfold it and be the first one to read it? Because I imagine you would have had your dad's cast-offs for quite a few years.
Well, we had a weekly paper in our town of Southern Pines, a very good one that's still going strong today, called The Pilot. And it came out on Wednesdays, and it cost a dime. And there were people selling it on the street corner, in our town. And I would often, we'd drive through, and I would get that paper and hand the person the dime and have it, and be able to at least look at it first in the car before it got home. That really was one of my early newspaper experiences.
Yeah. What was it about the newspaper, do you think? Was there anything physical? It was quite a glamorous industry when we were much younger. I think that's completely gone now. Journalism is a totally different notion in the modern era, which in some ways is very sad. In some ways it's probably not so bad. But it was quite glamorous. What was it about there was always an aura about a physical newspaper, I thought. You, like me, would have worked at newspapers where it comes off the press and it comes up to the editorial floor, those first issues. There's something exciting about that, isn't there?
There was an excitement, and even the smell. The smell was just. And even at at Golf World when I worked there, Golf World magazine in North Carolina, I worked there for several years in the 80s. It was printed right out in that location, and same thing, you could smell it coming off the press. It was terrific.
Yeah.
It was like it was a very tangible thing, and it did permeate more than just your sense of sight. It was a smell, and when you heard the press, obviously the sound. It was terrific.
The rumble in the building when those big presses would start up, you'd feel the whole building would just move a little bit, almost like an earthquake. Lots of people won't understand that. And then, of course, Bill, where did you start then in journalism and writing? I want to talk to you about writing. You're such a fabulous writer and you've won lots of awards. I'm sure you must be incredibly wealthy now because you've won so many awards and it's such a lucrative industry. We'll probably come to that a bit later too. But where did you start then in newspapers/magazines? You mentioned Golf World there. You were editor there for some time as well.
Yeah, I got started. The first real publication I wrote for we had a ninth grade, one edition of a ninth grade newspaper. That was my first, and I actually still have a copy of it. And boy, was I bad.
Nobody's born knowing this stuff, Bill. Nobody. You've got to start somewhere.
But boy, yeah, you got to start somewhere, and that was it. And then through high school, and contributed to that same paper that I mentioned that we would buy for a dime, but really it was in college. When I got to college, I immediately tried to join the staff of the Student Daily newspaper. Came out 5 days a week, which I did. Worked my way up the ladder there from just writing about club sports and intramurals to eventually becoming the sports editor of the paper. So that was a lot of good experience during college, covering all the different sports, including basketball and football, which were kind of big deals at the time.
Mandatory, I would imagine. Did you ever cover news at all, Bill, or have you always been a sport-only guy?
A little bit of news during college, and the last 10 years, I've written a column for a magazine in my hometown, North Carolina, that's usually not about golf. It's not really news, but more feature, more pieces about history pieces. But I was never. I got to say, when I was a teenager, like many of that era, we were certainly brought to journalism in a way because of Watergate and what Woodward and Bernstein did. It was exciting, and I ended up being more interested in sports, but I always had an interest. I thought about being a political journalist, and certainly had kept up with politics and still do, but I did gravitate to writing about sports fairly early.
Why do you think that is? Why sport?
I guess I just had a love of the different sports, but I also always, and I don't know, not sure why this is, but I always thought that you could write about sports and it didn't have to be hackneyed. It didn't have to be cliched. It could be good quality work. I was always drawn to the writers that used, fresh language, like, Red Smith, the great sports columnist in New York, or, whomever it might be, Frank DeFord writing long pieces in Sports Illustrated. They were very literate. I remember I first subscribed to Sports Illustrated when I was 10 or 11 years old.
Wow.
And that was a revelation, getting that magazine and seeing, not that the Greensboro paper that we read every day wasn't, respectable and well done for what it was. But, these were people at the top of their game, getting the space and the time to write in depth. And that made a mark on me. And fortunately, I was able to do my version of that, at least at times over the years, when it came to writing about golf.
You've done it sort of fabulously. There's some correlations between writing and golf in some ways, aren't there? All of us have access to the same words, don't we? The same way all of us have access to all the same equipment, the golf balls, the instruction, and all the rest of it. And yet, writing and golf are two completely both individual and personal pursuits. There are no two DNAs the same, are there?
No, there can be two people that write very well about golf, and they just have different styles. I think after all these years, I have a certain style. Everybody develops that style, and you develop that style by by not only writing a lot, but by reading a lot and trying to, at first, you're certainly trying to imitate people that you see that are doing it properly. The stories about the late Dan Jenkins talking about, once he got a typewriter as a child, he would just, he would at first just retype stories that were in the Fort Worth paper. And then he would start messing around with it, putting his own spin or tone on it. And eventually, from those beginnings, he developed into one of the most important, sports writers in history. So everybody has their take, and you don't develop it overnight. It takes time.
Yeah, some still do just type out what was written somewhere else and pass it on as their own. But we'll move on from that.
Sadly, yeah, we've all been victimized by.
Yes,
I know I was one time. I was shocked when a writer overseas picked up several paragraphs of a story that I'd written in Golf World back.
Not me, was it, Bill? I hope
2000. What? Pardon?
Not me. I hope.
No, it wasn't you. It wasn't. I will not.
That would have been awkward. Would have been awkward. You mentioned Dan Jenkins there, and I mentioned John Huggan earlier. Two elements of one of my favourite stories. That Huggy has a lot of great stories, but I recall him telling me that he was walking into the media centre at the Masters once, and Dan Jenkins was standing at the front smoking a cigarette, and they exchanged hellos. And Huggy just said to him, as you do, what are you up to, Dan? And Dan looked at him, took a drag on his cigarette, blew out the smoke, and said, "I'm writing." Now, people who've never written anything might not understand that, might they? I worked in a newsroom here in Sydney where it was not unusual, quite close to deadline, for a game of office cricket to break out with one of those cardboard rolled-up post packs you'd put a poster in, some rolled-up, just newspaper with some sticky tape around it. And that was, in fact, important to the process. Talk a little bit about writing. Everybody's different, obviously. What's your sort of writing process? Would you have been up there playing cricket with the boys?
I've probably written some of my stories while putting at a water glass on a carpet. Yeah, I mean, sure. You sometimes get thoughts when you're doing something like that, or when you're laying in bed, or when you're taking a short walk. Yeah, I mean, in working on this book over the last months, you have to take a break. You just can't, grind. I can't grind for like 8 hours you have to get up, stretch your legs. And sometimes you get fresh thoughts when you step away from the computer.
Do you like to write, Bill?
I do. I think I think that was it Dorothy Parker? It came up, I like having written. I mean, of course you like it when it's done, right? But there are times where you create a sentence that you say, man, this is good. This is why I liked it. This is why I do this. And then there are other times when and I had a little period of this last week where I was just really struggling to try to get through this certain section of my book, and it's tougher. But you have your good days and bad days, but I think, and I've certainly not been as good at this as probably I should have been, but the key is to just sit down and write, and whether it's good or bad, you can't rewrite words that aren't on a page. You can rewrite words that are on a page, even if they're crappy. So that's a great lesson for anybody young who's starting out. You can't say, "Oh, I'm not good today, I'm not going to write." You have to try to produce.
Well, AI's got the key. It's much easier to rewrite than to write. I'd much rather someone send me a poorly written story and I fix it. That's less work than me generating the ideas to produce the sentences in the first place.
Yeah. I mean, the phrase writing is rewriting. Of course, I mean, I'm pretty fortunate. I'm a pretty clean writer. And when I'm writing a newspaper or an internet story on deadline, knock wood, the person that's editing it usually doesn't have to do a whole lot to it, which is, I'm grateful for that. I have that ability, but everybody needs an editor, and the longer the piece, the more involved the piece, the more that a good editor is absolutely needed and should be appreciated.
You've done a lot of feature and long form writing. That's very different to day-to-day reporting, isn't it? They're a little bit like the doctor and the pharmacist. They're very related, but they're completely different things, aren't they?
They are. I think, I did over my career at Golf World and other places. I wrote quite a few 3,000, 4,000 word pieces, which, certainly not super long, but compared to the New Yorker.
Oh, they're long enough, Bill. That's long enough. Trust me.
But, if you're writing a 800 word piece or 1,000 word piece, you still try to make it flow, and you try to have some flourishes. And, I wrote the last number of years. I've been at the Masters, writing for the Masters website, masters.com.
Mm.
And this year was a pretty cool year to be there doing that,
You
given
think?
that McIlroy completed the career Grand Slam. But that's that Sunday evening when it was all happening, and you didn't know if he was going to hang on, and it was a crazy up and down round. But I think the final putt dropped at 7:15, and I filed the story at 9:15. So I did like a 1,400 word story in 2 hours, and I was pretty pleased with it, and it was fun to still be able to, at my advanced age, to be able to crank that out, and not just hopefully have some flourishes in there, a piece that people enjoyed.
You'll have people say this to you, as I have, Bill. Oh, you get paid by the word. Fantastic. You just churn out more words. It's not how it works, is it, my friend?
No, the price per word in the magazine business certainly used to be higher than it is now, with a few exceptions.
I guess the other part of that is that, in fact, one of the keys to writing is brevity, isn't it? Good writing is always has brevity as a feature. It's not wordy, it's not flowery, it's not overwritten.
Right, you're right. You want it to be compelling and have some pizzazz, if you will, with a nice turn of phrase or what have you. But you don't want it to be overwritten and clumsy or overwritten. That's not good. And I think that's why you want to use Red Smith was great. The late Red Smith was great at using simple English words in a creative way. The quarterback was slammed to the turf like apple butter, or what. He just that's what you try to be fresh without being cliched, and that's always the challenge, especially under a tight deadline.
The very best writing, and I think Golf Digest, the US, to their credit, used to do this probably better than anyone with their very long, multiple interview question and answer series. You would get to the end, and you'd turn the page and be disappointed there was no more. That's the goal, isn't it?
Right. Guy Yoakum, my friend and colleague, former colleague, Guy was terrific at putting together those my shots.
Best thing ever written.
So good. Yeah. I mean, what an archive, a valuable archive that is of the golfers that played the game in the 20th century. Just terrific. Yeah. We'd have people, executives or some editors at Golf World say, y'all need shorter articles. Mm-hmm. And I mean, maybe I'm biased. I never heard any subscriber, and Golf World had 100,000 or so devoted, loyal subscribers who renewed year after year despite spotty postal service. I never heard anyone say, man, that article was too long. I mean, they loved the subject. It's not like they were reading the stuff about the stock market so they could make money. They loved it. It was their passion. So I think, I think we've gotten to the point now where even on the internet and a lot of the websites that do stories, whether it's golf.com, Golf Digest, I mean, there's some long stories out there again, and that's good because I don't, if a story is good and well written, as you say, you want it to keep going. You don't want it to be over.
That's what a good writer does. It's always surprised me, Bill, and I don't know what your experience has been, but how many people, and particularly on the management side of businesses that publish writing, have actually no interest in reading. I've heard the same thing myself from people saying, people don't want long stories. Well, A, who said that? And B, that's kind of the point of the whole thing, is long stories. Yeah. If you're a newspaper, you report the news, and sometimes there's only 4 paragraphs to write because it's only just happened. But in a magazine, if you're going to write a feature about a player, the last thing you want is a short feature, because what's the point of that?
Right. You're trying to, and I think, I've been a little out of touch with the current wave of golfers. I'm out doing the TV work, but I'm not really in the flash areas trying to get players so much now, but at least right now. But you want to go beyond the surface stuff, and to do that, you have to observe. You have to observe the players. Number one, in the flesh. You have to be able to sit down with them, and that's in most cases, or in many cases now, that's hard to do because the top players have layers of people between themselves and reporters, in a different way than they used to years ago. And I think, they do let people in. I know that the PGA Tour did a nice film about Scotty Scheffler last year that was actually nominated for a Sports Emmy.
Mm.
It was really good. They got the access. Of course, through the full swing has gotten access, but there, I'm biased, and you're, like you, but there's nothing like a written story that really gets to the heart of the matter. And I just surely hope that we don't ever lose that aspect of media, because it's important.
Isn't this one of the threats to that aspect of media, Bill? What you've described, the Scotty Scheffler film that the PGA Tour made, you're right, it's fantastic. It has been nominated.
It is that you worry that the associations or the organizations will get access and the at-large reporters will get frozen out. Well, that is concern. And
why?
I think
what's the problem?
The organizations would be short-sighted to let that happen to a large degree. They might, oh yeah, that's ours, we want to do it, but yet it's limiting, I think. And
tease out for the listener why state-run media is a bad thing.
Well, as I said, I write for the Masters website, so I don't want to be hypocritical.
No.
I can say that they've never censored anything that I've written about the goings on at the tournament. But I think if the PGA Tour website does a piece about a certain player and there's some negative aspect, they might not focus on that, or they might not dwell, and that's their prerogative. But is the reader fully served by that? Probably not. But let's just hope that the reader is not served by that. Let's be very honest.
Yeah. In a shrinking media landscape, in this digital landscape, the issue becomes, does it not, that becomes the main thing left to consume. You have to look really hard to find something else. Right. It's an issue because the problem for independent journalists, I have a newsletter. I've been a little slack lately. I'm going to get back. You got my complaint. Thank you. Excellent. No, but I'm trying to get through this book project. But I don't. Independent people, by and large, they don't have the funds to travel and spend days on the road like they would if they were financed by a larger publication, and that's a problem. You can write cogent opinions from afar, but again, to be there in the trenches, observing. There were years at several majors where I remember following Ernie Els one year at the Open Championship. Followed him every step of the way for 72 holes, and just kind of wrote a piece. He didn't win, but I think it was an illuminating piece about who he was at the time. But those type things, that was a flight to the UK and a hotel and a rental car that, the magazine paid for. Could I do that now on my own? Probably not. No. So it's a reality, definitely. Ultimately, is it not the consumer, and then by extension the broader game? And I think particularly in golf, which is different to a lot of the sports, that tribal aspect we talked about earlier. I think the attraction for golf fans is they play, so there's a different relationship with the players. The players are better, but they're experiencing many of the same things just at a much higher level than us recreational golfers. I think that's the link for me in golf. It's not the tribal nature of it. I can't remember where I was going with that now. But yeah, so by extension, does not the whole game suffer if the coverage is not broad? And that includes things I don't agree with. It's important that they get published too, isn't it? Yeah, I think the wider, broader scope of coverage. I mean, I think that's only beneficial to the game overall. Now, whether is it beneficial to the business of the game, which in so many ways, the business of the game seems to take priority in many places at many times. But I think when there are stories out there that are fair, but true to the writer, those are the stories that
that resonate and are valuable.
Yeah.
Excuse me.
Yeah. And ironically, Bill, and you would have experienced this. I haven't, because don't know that many of the players. I'm sure you've written something at some point that a player didn't like, but ceded the point that it was a fair thing to write. The players themselves respect that, don't they?
I'd like to think they do. I can recall one instance. It was in 1998, a long time ago. It was a feature on Phil Mickelson. It was a cover story for Golf World, and the headline was kind of stark. The cover line was kind of stark. It said, "Does Phil Mickelson have what it takes to win a major championship?" Because he'd been on tour for a handful of years. He had not won a major. He had frittered away a couple chances. And in other occasions, he really hadn't played well at all in a major. And I sort of wrote a survey talking to different sources, not anonymous sources, on the record sources, talking about, and talked to Phil himself, about that topic. And, it was a story in the preview issue to the 98 PGA at Solly out in Washington State. And I remember making a point of being around Mickelson when he finished his first round, just so if he had any beef with it, I was there to take whatever he might say. He said, it's fair piece. He didn't say, hey, great job, but it was fair. So did he like having that being portrayed that way? Probably not, but the story was fair, and he admitted that it was.
Yeah, and generally speaking, my experience with players is they are much more resilient to that stuff than those around them think they'll be.
Oh, absolutely. Not to defame the world of agentry and managers, but I have to believe that many of those folks are much more gun shy than they need to be when it comes to allowing access by a reporter to their clients, to their players. I think most, there's a lot of bashing of the media at large in the last 10 years, fake media and all that BS, but I just think most reporters, not only in sports but they're out there to try to do the best job they can. They're not out there to distort the facts. In minority situations, does that happen? Of course, but by and large, they want to try to get to the heart of the matter as they see it and as it exists. And I think that when society at large starts doubting that, and we've gotten to that place in the broader culture, that's not a good thing.
No, this is not going to be a popular position, Bill, but my limited experience in my newspaper days with politicians tells me the same thing, that by far the majority of them actually work really hard at really tedious and uninteresting stuff most of the time. And a bit like the media, it's not the day-to-day reporters generally. Look at the columnists. Look at the opinion writers. They're the ones who want to be the leader of the party, the president, the prime minister. There's a different agenda personally. 98% of people out reporting day-to-day news, the car accidents, the problems with the school crossing, the dangerous school buses, those people have no interest in any of that stuff for the most part, in my experience.
And I don't know how it is in America, in Australia, but in America now, as they call them, news deserts are really increasing, and it's a problem because when you don't have a local newspaper like the weekly paper that I grew up and my family and everybody in our little town grew up reading, and fortunately it still exists and still functions as it should. But it's a watchdog function. If you don't have somebody guarding the hen house, the fox is going to get in there, and it's an increasing problem. There've been a lot of ventures, public-private initiatives, because the newspaper industry is drying up. But it's a problem if nobody is there to keep an eye on the people making governmental decisions.
The newspaper cannot be recreated online, can it? If it could, Rupert Murdoch would have done it. And if Rupert Murdoch hasn't done it, it means it can't be done.
Well, I think it can be recreated, but the profit margin, is not there. I mean, historians at some point will have a field day with how the whole newspaper business handled the advent of the internet. I think if there could have been the foresight to somehow, or if the technology had been there to have micro charges, micro fees, a penny here, penny there, it would have somehow allowed people to pay for the content rather than just saying, oh, I'll get my news off the internet. Well, you're getting somebody is producing that news either in a quality way or a BS way. And, it's not just appearing out of the ether. It's somebody's producing it. And things change so fast, and newspaper executives perhaps had their heads in the sand for too long. And it just didn't allow the new age to develop in a way that it might have.
I think, Bill, this is a larger contributing factor than we might give it credit for. I think the fact you can't recreate that physical excitement we spoke about earlier of the paper arriving and getting the first, you cannot do that on a screen. You can't lay out a front page on a screen. You can't do something interesting with an amazing photo on a screen the way you can do on a front page. And I think all of that contributes in ways that are difficult to articulate. But reading the Washington Post or the New York Times or the Sydney Morning Herald or the Daily Telegraph or Golf Australia magazine, reading it on a computer is nothing like reading a paper or a magazine. It's consuming perhaps the same content, but in such a different way that it fundamentally changes that relationship, I think.
I believe you're right. I don't know, how many studies have been done on that. I'm sure there might have been. But I think, if you look at let's say you look at a website X after a major golf championship, and they have a slideshow of photographs, maybe 20, 30 photographs. There's perhaps even too many photographs. As a result, whereas if you had gotten the weekly magazine or a newspaper where there had been only the strong, where you had gotten only the strongest handful of images, they would have had more impact to the reader.
Mm-hmm. There's something about that. Scarcity.
Sorry.
That's okay. But for those not, Bill picked up a bit of a cold last week at Erin Hills, and so he's very kindly agreed to do this whilst having a frog in his throat. I'm sorry, Bill, I interrupted you.
Sorry about that.
Yeah, so there is a difference there. I don't know that you can help, but let's move on because there's some things I wanted to ask you about. Now, we, of course, know you for your writing, and I've not known many in this business over the years who've made this move. You're also an award-winning photographer, golf photographer. What are the similarities and differences between those two? Because they're both trying to do the same thing, aren't they? They're trying to tell a story.
Well, most of my photography took place in the 1980s and 90s in the film age, when we shot color slide film, which was very unforgiving. You had to get the proper exposure. You weren't able to look at the back of the camera and, check the exposure when a golfer, hit it into the forest. So it was a challenge, but it was great fun. I think the first 40 men's majors that I was credentialed for, it was as a photographer. Some of those I would be writing as well, but it was a great experience. I wouldn't trade it for anything. Golf photographers, they work very hard, and that's true in the film era or now in the digital age. You do a lot of walking. It's physically hard. Certainly depending on the weather and the topography of the course, but there's still some great photographs being made. My friend David Cannon of Britain, he's still at it and still producing great stuff. I think back to sadly, Phil Sheldon of England. He's been gone for a couple decades now. He passed away way too young, but Phil's body of work, sometimes now in the Golfer's Journal magazine, they will run some of Phil's fantastic photos where he had a great eye. I was lucky to get, I did a nice photograph at the Open at Sanders a couple years ago. I stepped out of the TV booth when Tiger was coming up, 17th hole at Sanders. It was a nice day with nice clouds above the town, and I got a nice shot of Tiger and Joe LaCava walking toward the green with the town in the background. It was fun to, I certainly wasn't dedicated to photography that week. I literally was out, for a 5-minute hiatus, but it's fun. I would like to shoot a tournament again for real. I haven't done it in a long time. I'd like to do it sometime soon. But there's still really good golf images being made. There were some fantastic images, I thought, at the recent Masters of Roy McIlroy. That moment when he really, fell to his knees on the 18th green after winning. I mean, that's as powerful stuff as golf has seen in a while. There was a lot of good work done at the Masters a couple months ago.
what makes a great golf photo, Bill, and how do you take a great golf photo? And there's a book in each of those subjects, I'm sure, but just pare it down to a quick summation for us, if you could.
Well, there's a couple different categories of photos I think that you make during golf tournaments. There's the pure action shots or reaction shots. In the case of McIlroy, after he won, those would be reaction shots of his emotion as he dealt with finally achieving that long sought goal of the career Grand Slam and a green jacket. But then you also have other shots where you're trying to do more. Say geometric compositions where, you're using the landscape more, maybe a looser shot, not necessarily a high news value, but more just a pretty picture, if you will. So I think every golf photographer, then and now goes out trying to make both those kinds of images, shots that, the nice impact shot is still nice to have, but sometimes it's those shots with some humor in them, some irony. Phil Sheldon was great at that. Lawrence Levy, great British photographer, also sadly died way too young. Lawrence was terrific. One shot of Lawrence's I remember from the Masters. It was a deputy, a tight shot of a law officer's midsection with his gun, and he had a Masters pairing sheet sticking out of his pocket. So it was the juxtaposition of the pairing sheet and the revolver. It was just it was a simple photo, but it was terrific. It made you think. So those types of things are what you shoot for. It's what I strive for, and it's what people still strive for when they're out there, in the sun or the rain, working hard.
Do you have a favorite golf photo? Or a couple that people might know?
I wrote a long piece back in 2013 when the U.S. Open returned to Marion. I just kind of did this on my own. I wasn't really assigned it. I think it ended up being about a 4,000-word piece for Golf Digest's website. Sort of keyed off the High Peskin photo of Ben Hogan at Marion in 1950. The famous shot from behind with the Hogan at follow through with the gallery on both sides, the green in the distance. I mean, that photo is regarded, as perhaps the best of all time by many people. But I kind of, wrote about that and, what made it a great photo, and then kind of brought in some more modern images. And I think a modern image that a lot of people cite is a shot by Fred Vuitch when Tiger completed the Tiger Slam at the 2001 Masters. Fred shot an image of Tiger driving off the 18th tee on Sunday from behind and above, a position that no longer exists, and with beautiful light. And it was the cover of Sports Illustrated, I believe, with the headline, the cover line masterpiece. Yeah. And, it not only was a masterpiece by Tiger winning that tournament, but it was a masterpiece by Fred Vuitch, who just got the PGA of America's Lifetime Achievement Award in photojournalism just this year at Augusta. So that photo stands out to me. But Steve Zerley, my longtime colleague at Golf World and Golf Digest, he did a fantastic reaction shot of Tiger when he chipped in on 16 at Augusta in 2005. That's a photo that stands out as well. I cited those two photos as one more of a High Peskin-like photo, and the other more of a modern photo taken with a telephoto lens that didn't really exist in 1950.
If anybody hasn't seen that Tiger photo, there is something magical about it. He has captured the transition from the finish of the backswing to the start of the downswing, a moment in time so incredibly short as to be invisible to the naked eye, yet is somehow visible in that photo. You've seen a million shots of Tiger at the top of his backswing, some of them very nice with St Andrews in the background, and it's a beautiful position. Everything about it in a golf sense works. But that photo, can you put your finger on what that bit of magic is? I feel like he captured a moment in time that almost isn't allowed to be captured.
Well, yeah, it was just everything came together, right? It was perfect. It was beautiful light late in the day, sunshine, perhaps some shadows. It was an icon of the sport, achieving something phenomenal, and as you said, the photo was beautifully framed, and he took it, at the absolutely right time.
Yeah. A
And
little bit
it
of
was,
luck,
he
but
took it.
we're all beneficiaries.
Yes. Well, yeah, I don't know if that was luck. That was, that was just a lot of skill, I think. Sometimes, hey, I was lucky a few times. One of the best photos I was there for Larry Mize when he won in '87, and most photographers were behind Mize, shooting down the line with a telephoto lens because we were a long way away. But that light was beautiful. It was late in the afternoon, early evening, and I remember the exposure. It was 2/50 of a second, 2.8 at 100 speed film pushed to 200 speed. I mean, I remember that so well because it was just that golden light, and we captured him at the apex of his jump. It was just great. But Fred's shot was tremendous.
Yeah.
I think you can we see so many videos now.
Yes.
That we're almost numb by them, and I think even still photography, before the advent of drones, a money helicopter shot or an airplane shot or a blimp shot or a cherry picker shot, those were kind of rare. And now there's so many beautiful aerial shots taken of golf courses, scenics. That you almost, and it's nothing against the photographer. They do,
Of course not.
there's a photographer named Evan Schiller, former PGA professional. He does fantastic course scenics, but every shoot he does, they're just these fantastic images, and it almost dulls the senses because they're all so good. And those type of shots used to be rare. And now, because of the technology that allows if you're expert with a drone, it allows you to capture these images that were just, you couldn't do 20, 30 years ago.
It's a little bit like having the Olympics every year, isn't it? Imagine if every tournament was a major. Well, none of them would be a major if they're all a major. There's a lot of that, isn't there, too, that sort of scarcity.
Right.
This is your first and final official warning, Bill. You're speaking to many Australians here. We remember the '87 Masters, and we do not need you bringing it back up. Thank you very much. Particularly about that shot. Particularly now, when did they take? They took Larry back there, did they not? ESPN and gave him. I can't remember how many goes at. I don't think he got any of them within 6 feet from that same spot.
Well, the thing is now, I mean, I don't know when the actual changes were made, but that landscape now is not the same as it was. That green is different. So you could not recreate that shot now if you wanted to.
We don't.
The slope of the land is different. Back then I think it was flatter. It's just a different, it was one of those magical moments. Yeah, sorry to bring
That's
up.
That's okay. You've had your warning. If you
that up. I got to say, I was around for 3 of those, Saturday slams in '86. I was at the '86 Masters, the '86 PGA, and the '86 U.S. Open, where the Shark was right there. What a season that could have been for him. Man, he was good. He, whatever you think of him now and his post-playing career and how he's, the live stuff, whatever. That guy, his golf, the way he drove the ball, with persimmon heads and steel shafts and the balata ball. It was fantastic. What a beautiful player he was.
Yeah, the young kids get bored with hearing us talk about that, but they never heard the sound of that balata coming off that person. It was like a rifle shot. It was the most extraordinary thing that you could ever have experienced. And you've reminded me, Bill, talking about that, and something we talked about earlier. You talked about Rory at the Masters. What are some of the best tournaments you've seen, and what makes a great tournament for you?
Well, I think if you have, as a person who, has spent a fair amount of his career focusing on, historical moments, I think if you have a tournament where there's some history on the line or history being made, that obviously hypes it up into another category. Even, you look back at, Scheffler winning the, back-to-back Players Championships. That's not a major, but nobody had done it before. So to do it is a big deal. McIlroy, I mean, my goodness, that quest had gone on for a decade or more. Yeah. When was it going to happen? Is it ever going to happen? There are other players, Palmer, Ballesteros, Watson. Yeah. They stopped winning majors in their early 30s. Was Rory going to be in the same category? Well, no, he's not. He found a way to get it done. So I think that element of history is huge. As far as pictures of it. If the lighting is beautiful, I mean, the lighting when Rory finished was tremendous. It helped enhance some of those great photographs that were made of him reacting to that long sought victory. I think at the Women's Open, a young woman from Sweden, Maya Stark, won last week.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it was well earned victory. Was it historic? Not really. I mean, it's just it was a nice championship. It was a tough course. She played the best and won. Is it gonna echo like some other women's majors? Probably not. But not her fault. She earned the victory.
Players always do what they're asked, Bill. That's kind of their deal. They just do what they're asked, which is play the best golf they can.
Yeah. Some majors are exciting. Some majors aren't. I remember hearing a golf writer back in 1987 at the U.S. Open at Olympic Club when Scott Simpson won it. He beat Tom Watson. Watson was having some real putting issues, and Scott Simpson, that guy earned that victory.
Yeah.
He might not be a household name. He might not have been the most exciting player, but Scott Simpson earned that victory. And I remember hearing a well-known golf writer that night or that weekend, saying, "Oh man, this is terrible, Scott Simpson." Well, I mean, that's golf. You lose a lot more than you win in golf, whether you're Tom Watson or Nicklaus or even Tiger Woods. And Scott Simpson beat Tom Watson fair and square that year. You can't take the achievement away from him.
No, and the temptation to pander to an audience that you think wants this, that, or the other, and to try and fiddle the fiddle. I'm very pleased that the PGA Tour have dropped the handicap system for the Tour Championship for that very reason. You do not need to give Scotty Scheffler 10 shots, people. Do you know what I mean?
I wish they would have gone to a Western amateur type format for that, where they had a couple days of stroke play and then go into match play. I think that would be ideal. But
do you know what I think?
A lot of reasons why they didn't.
I understand that. I understand the problems with match play and everything. But do you know what I reckon they should do? 3 days of stroke play, top 2 playoff. That's it for the whole pot. 2 players, 18 holes. Go for it, fellas.
That would be compelling.
Nobody wants to watch round robin matches and playoff.
No, I would. I mean, I was at that the match play event that used to be held in Austin for a number of years, and when it was pure match play, when you had the 64 players going at it and knockout play, that first day was terrific.
Hey.
It was fantastic, but then when they went to the round robin thing, it just lost its juice to me.
Because they're trying to manufacture a high profile pairing for the final round, which is madness.
Right.
Who is going to honestly say that Nick O'Hearn beating Tiger Woods in match play twice is not a better story than somebody who won 2 of 3 matches and got through to the next round? And nobody's interested.
Is Nick O'Hearn Australian?
Oh, is he Australian? No. I mean, he's the rarest of all. He's a left-handed Australian who now putts right-handed since they sort of took the
the upsets are. I mean, if you're a corporate sponsor, I get it. You want to, but if you have a match play event, you should have a match play event, and that's what makes it fun.
Yeah.
And in that case, the best day probably was the first round, not the championship
100%
match.
Well, so often,
but
event.
that you're not getting you're not necessarily getting the biggest TV audience or the biggest on-site crowd on a Wednesday versus a Sunday.
Almost by default, every year the semi-final. One of the semi-finals was almost always the match of the week. I felt that match play. Yeah, McIlroy and Westwood that year. And it wasn't the final, but. Somebody went on to the final. I was like, I'm knackered now. That was the real match. Speaking of, I wanted to ask you this question specifically. Where does Rory's Masters win this year stand in the pantheon of great Masters? Is it as good as I thought it was?
I think Rory's win is up there. I mean, in my personal ranking, I would of the ones that I've been to.
What's ahead of it? What's ahead of it? Anything?
I think Jack in '86 is ahead of it, and I think I don't know that Tiger in 19 is ahead of it, but it's up there too. Because it was so, it marked the comeback from the spinal fusion surgery.
I'd also put 97 in there, I think, for the opposite reason.
97 was fantastic too. I mean, just the brilliance that he showed that week and the historical significance of being the first minority champion. That was big there.
Well, you felt the turning point too, didn't you? You felt, okay, now Tiger's time begins.
Yeah, I mean he had won a couple of tournaments prior to that, but that dominant performance, that after going out in 40 on Thursday, my goodness,
Yeah.
To shoot 40 on your first nine and then lap the field like he did, that was phenomenal.
And then tell the other players post that you didn't have your A game this week. That upset a few, didn't it? I recall that there was a few. And in hindsight,
but in terms of just topsy turvy drama, Rory's is right at the top. I mean, that was wild the way he played. The ups and the downs. I mean, to hit that wedge in the water on 13, I mean, that was stunning.
He may not have hit a shot that bad since before he was a teenager. I really believe that.
That was awful.
I'd see that at my local course.
But then the shot he hit, the 7-iron on 15, the high hooking shot, that I think I wrote on deadline, it landed like it was, dropped by parachute. I mean, it was fantastic. And then the shot on 17 from below the hill to hit it stiff. I mean,
then the wedge into the bunker on 18, Bill. Tell me what's going on there.
Right.
I've already had enough.
It was highs and lows. It was just, it was crazy. I mean, I mean, no wonder he dropped to his knees on the after he won. I mean, it was incredible what he went through.
Yeah, forget about the Grand Slam. Just that Sunday was enough to force you to drop to you.
I mean, you look at Nicklaus. Of course, there was lots of drama with Norman and Kite and Seve chasing him. But Jack himself, he didn't. He was 30 on the back. He was great. He didn't have any mess ups except the bogey on 12. Man, Rory was incredible, the ups and downs.
Yeah. What does it do for Rory, do you think?
Well, it cements his place as one of the top golfers of all time. I mean, 6 players now that have won a career Grand Slam. Yeah. And as people wrote, as I wrote, his situation in achieving it was different from the previous 5.
Agreed.
Sarazen, okay, he won the 1935 Masters thanks to a dramatic 4-wood shot that got him into the playoff. But he was just winning. He was winning a tournament that was in its second year. There was no pressure on him.
He wasn't playing the Masters, was he? As we know.
Right. And then when Nicklaus and when Hogan came around and he completed it in 53, it wasn't about completing the career Grand Slam. It was about completing the 3 victories in one season. He was under no pressure to complete the career slam. Nicklaus and Player and Woods, they all did it in their 20s. They did it before the pressure had a chance to build. Yeah. Rory's was a unique scenario, I believe.
Well, I agree. It was a triple header, wasn't it? There was the career Grand Slam. There was the revenge for 2011 when Augusta stabbed him in the heart. Was he 4 or 5 in front, standing on the 10th tee? There's that. And then it's been 11 years since he won any major, and he's been the player over all of that time. That triple, you saw it when he collapsed, as you've pointed out, some of the most extraordinary scenes I've seen on a golf course. Am I right, Bill? And I like to be right. It doesn't happen often. I think the game's best served when Rory is around the top of the game, either the world number 1, the world number 2, when he's the public face of it. What's your thoughts about that? Because this goes to the role of professional golf in what it should ultimately be about professional golf, which is promoting the recreational game and getting more people to play and enjoy this wonderful lifetime pursuit.
Yeah, it would be fantastic if Rory and Scheffler end up having a couple of duels, I think, or again, or as in the U.S. Open last year, Rory and DeChambeau, who's a compelling figure. It'd be fantastic if those guys go toe-to-toe. They weren't in the same group at Pinehurst a year ago in the U.S. Open. It would be fantastic if that scenario would play out in a major, whether it's next week at Oakmont or in Port Rush.
We'll take it any time, Bill.
We'll take it any time.
We'll take it both times, actually. Why not both,
we talk about losing, in golf more than you win. Well, how many have we over the years? We crave for these head-to-head matchups, and how infrequent they really happen. That's just the nature of the sport. It's nobody's fault. It just it's not like Nadal and Federer, mowing through the field and ending up in the final. It's just different. Golf's different, and that's why it does happen. Even like last year at Pinehurst, they weren't in the same group, but man, to have McIlroy and DeChambeau, going at it, that was compelling.
We say this. I said before not to bring up the '96 Masters, but I've heard this theory a bunch of times, and I think it's got some credit. Anyone but Faldo in the final round, and Norman wins that. There's something about the personality there that drove the result. Do you think there's a different result with DeChambeau and Rory at the US Open if they were in the same group? Because we saw what happened when they were in the same group on Sunday at Augusta.
Yeah. I don't know. I think the Faldo dynamic had a lot to do with it. I think, he was the perfect player to put that kind of pressure on Norman. He's 67 was a exquisite round of golf, and
would have annoyed Norman no end just watching that golf, because that style of golf Norman would watch and just find annoying. How am I having to share the golf course with this bloke who plays this way when I've got the big shots and the flair and exciting golf? It was the right personality mix for that result, I think.
I will never forget standing up by the clubhouse, middle of that afternoon or late that afternoon as that round was unfolding, and you could just sort of down in the valley, you could just hear the groans, and then you hear the silence. It was just an eerie feeling. And, then when the thing ended, it was just, that was quite a day.
Surreal, I would have thought.
In a way it was. It was a strange one. And Norman,
one of those rare ones where the second place finisher gets more attention than the winner.
And, full credit for Norman. He came in and he talked to the press after that huge disappointment.
Now, you would have been there, Bill. I think I've got this right. An Australian journo who I knew who was also there, his recollection was that Norman sort of came in, sat down, and nobody kind of knew what to say. And that Norman said, "Okay, listen, I played like shit. Anyone got any questions?"
Yep.
Is that right? Is that what happened?
Pretty much. It was in the media center that they no longer exist. They went to the new fancier one at the end of the driving range sometime, in recent years. It was a packed room. It was a smaller room, more old school room than the room they use now. It was something. The guy was clearly, in shock, but he talked. He did. He really threw that one away, and Faldo put the pressure on him to allow it to happen.
Proper golf.
That was quite a day.
Yeah, proper golf. That whole exchange in the 13th fairway of Faldo going backwards and forwards between the 2-iron and the 5-wood. Norman's up in the pine straw on the trees, and just one of the few times when you say slow play is actually a good thing. That one was magnificent.
Right. That he Faldo going back and forth, with his caddy Fanny Sinerson before, choosing the iron instead of the fairway metal on that second shot over the water. That was a dramatic moment. Yeah.
And then Norman
pulled it off.
And Norman essentially being talked into laying up by Tony Navarro. Well, we don't know what would have happened if he'd hit the Mickelson shot from up there, do we?
Right. But man, there had been so much damage before that. You really can't pin it all on that.
Oh, no. You don't blame Tony Navarro under the circumstances at that point of the round, suggesting that he lay up rather than take on the long water carry from a dodgy lie. It was probably not the play.
That Mickelson shot, I mean, that was an incredible one. I mean,
still to this day, one of
to thread it through there and
then miss the putt.
People forget he missed the putt.
That's right. I don't forget. I hold him. You didn't do. It was almost one of the greatest eagles ever made, but it was still one of the best birdies, as you say. And, speaking of that, who's the best player you've seen, and what's your criteria for that?
The best player I've ever seen?
Yeah.
I think Tiger's played the best golf. I think.
Hasn't got as many majors as Jack, though, so who's the better player, Bill?
Right. I was lucky to see Jack at least in the tail end of his career. Well, I saw him earlier than that as a kid, as a spectator, back in the 70s in Pinehurst. When he was the top player in the world. That was fun to see him in the flesh. He finished second to Johnny Miller. He lost the playoff to Johnny Miller in '74, and then he won it. I think he won it the next year. So, I mean, that was fun to see peak Jack, but to see peak Tiger and just the flair with which Tiger won sometimes. Of course, like Jack, he sometimes allowed the field to come, to fade away, and he would win with consistency. But there were times where, the flop shots he holed or the dramatic shots out of trouble, more of that type stuff than Jack produced. So Jack didn't have to produce it. I don't know. Tiger to be able to chronicle Tiger that was fun for a sports writer, for anybody that has been around and got to cover him. I think, as I'm sure, he didn't. We probably all. I think it would have been a great bet if you in say 2003. What okay, how many majors is Tiger going to end up with? I think a lot of people, informed people in golf, would have said 20 or more. But
100%, I would have said, and you would have been mad to say anything else at the time. You really would have been.
I mean, he was so very good, and there, he hadn't hit. There were no potholes yet, but as we know, life intervened.
Indeed, he wasn't just good, Bill. He was better, wasn't he? He's still better. Do you know what I mean? It wasn't just that he was good. There's a lot of good players, a lot of really good players. He was a better player in just, and the numbers reveal. You read Justin Ray's stats sometimes on Tiger Woods just for a bit of sport these days, and it's still beggars belief. Hundreds and hundreds of shots ahead of Mickelson and Els in the majors over pick a period. Like hundreds of shots is extraordinary.
Yeah, the strokes gained figures are wild. I just watched some highlights from 2000 U.S. Open. Hard to believe, quarter century ago at Pebble. Yeah. To win by 15 shots.
15, Bill, 15 shots.
And you had. I remember, Watson was there playing that week. Tom Watson. These players admitted these are fantastic players, and they were admitting just how much better Tiger was. They knew They'd been there. They'd won their major. They knew how good Tiger was. They were giving him credit because it was just so phenomenal.
So, and then part of that kind of feeds itself. I can't imagine Tom Watson's ever said that about anybody except perhaps Jack Nicklaus, and that would have been grudgingly and would have been followed by for the moment.
Right. And I think he probably. I mean, he played an exhibition with Arnold Palmer when he was when Tom was a teenager. I mean, he definitely saw Arnold, up close when Arnold was at his peak in the '60s. But but they know, those players know, they know that, and if they're being honest, it's funny. I was at the '96 Milwaukee Open, which was the first event Tiger played as a pro. It was interesting, and it was in Milwaukee. I don't know that I'd been back to Milwaukee since, but being in Wisconsin last week reminded me of it. There were some pros that week that were still skeptical of Tiger. They said, "Hey, let's see how the young man does as a pro. Let's see. Let's show me. That okay. You won 3 juniors. You won 3 U.S. amateurs. Nobody had done that. I mean, clearly phenomenal stuff, but." There was still some skepticism, but
some. Curtis Strange, Bill Fields. You'll learn.
Right.
You'll learn.
Curtis Strange, for one. Right. In that interview that's gotten gets pulled out.
Poor Curtis.
So
he's been on this show and talked about poor Curtis.
Yeah.
I mean, it's perfectly legitimate thing to say, and he has the standing in the game to say it at the time. We look back now and say, how could you? But at the time. I probably watched it at the time and thought to myself, he makes a good point there. It's not all beer and Skittles, Tiger. That's what we know. But
Tiger was, he was just starting out, and he finished 30th or 40th at the Greater Milwaukee Open, and then but then by the end of the year he'd won twice, and he'd. He was on his way. And then, as you said, the 97 Masters came along, and wow, that was like, okay, this guy is the real deal. If you had any doubts. And, the 2000 U.S. Open, incredible. 4 majors in a row. I mean,
You can't imagine we'll
Something.
ever see it again. It's
Yeah.
just,
Yeah.
you just, you can't imagine that we'll see it again. That attitude towards Tiger early in his career was not restricted to just that early end. He came and played here in Australia in back end of 96 before he won the Masters, and I think he came, might have been before he won the Masters. He was being hyped. Yeah, he came in late 96 and then early 97 and played the Australian Masters down here. And there was huge hype because he'd won a couple of tournaments by then. And I can distinctly recall Robert Allenby sitting in a press conference and saying, well, you guys might not realise it, but there's some other golfers playing this week.
Right.
It's just all Tiger all the time, of course.
That was kind of the vibe I remember maybe being at the Byron Nelson in Dallas after he won the 97 Masters, that next couple of weeks later. And I mean, what a frenzy it was.
Oh, yeah. We forget Tiger Mania, the two Tiger Manias, Bill, and I've never seen anything like it. Never, before or since.
And I covered the 2000 Canadian Open when Tiger hit that shot out of the sand on the 18th and beat Grant Waite. But that crowd was wild. I remember a young man got hit in the head by one of Tiger's shots early on the Sunday, and he got bandaged up and he was back out. He wanted to see it. He was back watching it. You know,
it happened.
It was
rarely.
like it was mandatory viewing. It was compelled. You wanted to see what he was doing.
Even if you didn't have an interest in golf, you were curious to see what he's doing. If you had an interest in golf, you couldn't wait to see what he was going to do next. What is that? What we're seeing from Scheffler now is not what Tiger did sort of on the course, but there's elements about that. But it's an extremely dominant sort of period just at the moment. Why doesn't he have it? Adam Scott doesn't have it. Beautiful player. Scotty Scheffler doesn't have it. And the it I'm talking about is the Spieth thing or the Minwoo Lee thing or the Rory thing. What is that electricity, the Norman thing? What's that electricity? And why don't all players have it? Only some.
Good question, Rod. I don't know, but you've named a few players that do have it. I think with Spieth, it sort of relates to his erratic tendencies at times, and he's able to come back from those. You know, that makes him different from peak Tiger or peak Scheffler or Rory. I don't know. Just kind of the way Rory. You know, if he's on a roll, just the way he walks along, it's like he's got springs in his shoes. There's just something cool. He does relate to the fans well. He smiles some.
He's genuine, isn't he? Including when he makes mistakes.
Seems genuine. Yeah. He absolutely seems genuine. I think if I don't know if you've seen the new biography that's out about Rory Land by Timothy Gay, but it's a really good look at Rory. I think it was he didn't get any cooperation from Rory, but just the going in depth about the McIlroy's family background and related to all the troubles in Northern Ireland. It's fascinating and really I think it really makes you appreciate. Makes you understand maybe McIlroy a little bit more.
Yeah. Ultimately, Bill, the sort of writing that you've done in the book that you just mentioned and some of the things we've just talked about, it strikes me that, in fact, the only thing in the world that is interesting is people, and that'll show to you through your chosen interests. Mine is golf, and so Rory's interesting. If you're into tennis, Andre Agassi's interesting. It's ultimately about people, isn't it? And no medium can capture people, I don't feel, the way writing can. How do you feel about that?
Yes. And I was just looking at a book about writing that I've had since I was in college in the late 1970s. It was by a man named William Zinsser. And over the years, it was called On Writing Well. And it was a guide to writing nonfiction, which is what we've largely been talking about in our conversation. But I was just looking at actually earlier today. He concludes his chapter about writing about sport, and he says these are the values to look for when you write about sport: people, places, the link between past and present, the tug of the future. Observe closely. Hang around the track and the paddock, the ballpark and the rink. Interview in depth, listen to old timers, ponder the changes, write well. I mean, that is unbelievably good advice, I think, for anybody that's trying to do this.
And note to publishers, and we understand that the bills have to be paid and it's not that easy. Covering a golf tournament is possible from afar, but it's not the same as covering a golf tournament on the ground. And it might not bear dividends that week or that day, though it often does. It bears fruit. The per word charge I mentioned earlier, people say, oh, you get 50 cents a word, you just write as much as you like. Say, I'm not getting paid for the words, I'm getting paid for the 25 years so that I know this stuff and can punch it out right now on deadline and not have to go look it up.
Right. And you're also getting paid for what you don't write, right?
Yeah, true.
You're getting paid for putting what should be in the piece, right? I mean, I remember talking to Dan Jenkins about this. It's not only, what you include in a piece that makes it good, but you don't want to include extraneous stuff that, is useless, which, that's what comes with seasoning and experience and talent. You want to include what should be in there and leave out what shouldn't be. And I don't mean leave out stuff that is critical, but it's just stuff that, it doesn't fit the flow of the story.
You're wandering in contentious areas here now, Bill, about interviews that have been edited and how they've been edited and which edits have been edited and what's been left out. And all of that is sort of a real shame. And we're going to wrap up because I've just realized how long I've been keeping you. But in terms of, you said before, one of the great things to learn about writing, if there's anybody interested in getting into this caper, one of the things was to look at others. Who do you read? Who did you look up to? Who are your favourite golf writers or writers generally?
Well, I'm sure you might have talked to Huggy about Tom Callahan. I think Tom Callahan was brilliant. Fantastic writer, great style. Charles Price was a fantastic writer of golf. Outside of golf, I always loved Frank DeFord. Gary Smith wrote long pieces that were nuanced, that made you feel like you knew the subject after you've completed reading 4,000, 5,000, 6,000 words. There's Peter Dobriner, the great British writer. He had great humor in his pieces, which I think is somewhat missing in today's scene.
Hard to do, Bill, isn't it? Humor. If you're not,
it is hard to do.
Michael
Michael Bamberger is really good and has been really good for a long time. He's still at it, and he's just got another book out. Michael's terrific. Knows the game, has worked hard to know the people in the game over the years. Alan Shipnick has a tremendous body of work, mostly for Sports Illustrated over the years. There's a number, there's so many people that have done good work.
I can see your ears whirring, thinking, who have I left out? There's somebody that I'm going to run into at the US Open. So you didn't mention me on that list? Yeah.
Yeah. Of the young folks that are on the scene now, Dylan DeChier of golf.com, he writes some nice pieces.
Great.
There's some people that are carrying the torch now. There's some of us that have been at it for a while that are still trying to do it. And there's certainly some people that I hope that the young people getting into it are smart enough to know to look up Charles Price and look up Peter Dobriner and look up Dan Jenkins and look up stories that other greats might have done years ago, because you can learn from that. And everything that's great was not produced in the last month. There's great stuff that's been out there for a while, and I think sometimes in the flurry of clicks and the rush to get stuff out there, it can be forgotten. But that would be a bit of advice to young people, is to go to the archives, find the way that greats of 30 or 50 or 70 years ago did it, and you can learn from that, just as I and other people of my generation tried to learn by reading people when we were growing up. All of that helps.
Yeah. My concern, not just for golf writing, but for journalism, media generally, with the decline in print, what that used to offer, you mentioned Huggy, you described sitting around and listening. Huggy tells me that the most important things he's ever done from a career perspective was to sit around in the Golf Digest house at the Masters every year and just listen to the Dan Jenkins and the Tom Callahans and these legendary guys, and understand that opportunity, it feels like, does not exist for the next generation. And I wonder whether we ultimately pay a price for that.
Right. And those type of informal situations are invaluable. I remember being invited to the Digest House One Masters when they had Tom Brokaw, the American
Oh,
newscaster, in,
wow.
and it was such a treat. I don't did I learn how to report from Tom Brokaw? No, but it was such a pleasure to be able to spend a couple hours listening to him tell stories. Um, I had that experience in college. There was an American journalist named Tom Wicker who came from North Carolina. Went to UNC as I did. A few of us in college got to spend an afternoon in a bar in Chapel Hill having beers with Tom Wicker,
Oh,
listening to him tell stories. That was among the best couple of hours I had at college. Um, and it was just like three or four students listened to this legendary political journalist. He had been on scene when John Kennedy was assassinated. He
wow.
had so many stories, and I think, but he's not telling us how to write a report, but you get inspired. There's a everybody needs to be inspired, and I remember I got to interview Frank DeFord about 20 years ago for a Connecticut magazine. Frank lived in Connecticut, and what a pleasure it was to be able to meet this man who I had looked up to so much, and who was, Frank was very kind over the years. He would, if you wrote him a story, ask him to critique your stories, he would do it, and he would offer encouragement, and he'd give you praise, and that meant the world to me and to other people, that many people that he did that for over the years. Um, it's you learn in a lot of ways, and you learn from books, and you learn from reading, but sometimes you do learn from just hanging around people.
It's not formal
And
training, is it? But it's proper training. That afternoon you talked about in a
right,
bar with some beer.
right.
You can't buy that. You can't even rent that. That's invaluable.
No, you can't. And what was wild about that was, the whole class was invited. It was a small class, but like for whatever reason, only three or four of us showed up, and it was made it better because it was like we were just hanging out with this legendary journalist that, as a North Carolinian, he meant a lot, because this guy had risen to the top of the business, and it was very, very inspiring and very cool.
More than that, Bill, the rest of the class have self-identified as not suitable for the job. Because if you've missed an opportunity
Well,
like that because you didn't recognize it, you don't belong in the industry. Last one to finish up, and we've mentioned him far too many times. He'll be getting his ego will be getting boosted. John Huggin insisted I just say to you something along the lines of, so mention the word karaoke. What's he getting at, Bill? Why are you laughing?
Oh my goodness! Oh my god, this is a great story, because I've only done karaoke a handful of times in my life. The first time I did it, uh, I was in Orlando at the Marriott Airport Marriott. I was photographing an instruction piece. Huggin was the writer, and I had arrived. I'm in the hotel bar, and it's karaoke night. This is early '90s probably, and I said, you know what? I feel like I'm gonna do it. I'm gonna try to sing a song. So I put my name in, and I said, I don't know anybody in this bar. This is great. I don't know anybody here. I can be bad, and it's not going to matter. So just when it's about my turn to go up and take the mic, who comes in the bar but Huggy?
I see. You weren't with him at the time. He stumbled.
So I went. I did not bail. I went up. I sang. "Sitting on the Dock of the Bay," Otis Redding classic. I sang it, and I get back, and Elgin said, "You weren't the worst."
That's as high as praise gets from Huggy. In Scotland, that's practically a knighthood.
That's right.
Bill.
That was right. That was high praise. But the fact that he rolled into the bar right when it was my turn, it was so funny.
Am I safe to assume that he did not follow in your footsteps and crank one out himself?
He did not,
No.
which was, he should have, but he didn't.
Yeah, not sure. One of the great karaoke career launching venues, the Airport Marriott in Orlando. Bill, you might not have realised that, but what a special place to have performed. It's been fabulous to have you. I've got a million other things I'd like to talk to you about. I'm sure everybody's got things to do, including you. You've been incredibly generous with your time, Bill. I can only recommend that people seek out your work. Where can they find it these days? You touched on it earlier, but where can people find you? Because in this new media age, you're kind of your own business as well, aren't you?
Yeah, I have a newsletter on Substack called The Albatross, so you can find my work there.
I'm highly recommending, by the way, The Albatross. It's a fantastic newsletter. It really is.
I hope that people tune in, people in America tune in to NBC Sports golf coverage, because I have a hand in those telecasts as a along with several talented colleagues as a researcher, helping the announcers. We're on the air a lot of hours now at tournaments, and
is that frantic, Bill? Is that what do you actually do? Are you handing notes to the famous people we see on camera?
It's old school. It's old school. 5x8 index cards.
Index cards.
Yeah, it's old school. Yeah. I work with Gil Capps is one of my colleagues. Gil has been alongside Dan Hicks in the NBC booth for a quarter century. Yeah. Gil is so talented and so invaluable to our shows. I work with a young man who's become a great friend, Harrison Root. He does what I do, and we work great together as a team. And it's what I found out in getting into the TV work 7 or 8 years ago is that it is such a collaborative effort. Any magazine work is, but TV really is. You're just trying to help the show be as good as it can be, and it's been fun to do this research role.
Give us a peek behind the scenes there, actually, Bill, because we just watched the coverage and it all looks so smooth, but it's a bit like the duck, isn't it? Underneath the water, the feet are going a million miles because it's live. You can make a mistake in a magazine and you can correct it before it goes to print. You can't do that on live TV. If you pass over the wrong information, that goes out to the world. Dan Hicks, for example, is going to be lambasted all the way here to Australia for saying something stupid, and it's your fault.
Right. Well, mistakes happen, but knock wood, not that often. You try to be very careful. But the real craziness is in the truck, the production truck, where the producer and director and all the valuable people in there are working. In the booth, we have it's a little bit of an oasis. I mean, it gets hectic, but that truck where the people are making decisions about which camera to go to, all that stuff is. Doing a golf tournament, it's like no other sporting event. If you do a basketball game or a football game or baseball or cricket, I would imagine, the action is all there on one place.
Fixed cameras, Bill. Leave the cabling in place. So that's right. Yeah. You come back next year and plug the cameras in. The only place you do that is Augusta. The rest of them, they roll out literally kilometers or miles of cabling, literally miles of the stuff. It's insane.
Certainly there are times where every golf broadcast is ripe for criticism. Everybody, we all make mistakes, but the reason we make mistakes is such a hard. There's a lot to do, and I think if viewers could ever get in the truck or even in the booth just to see it, they would be amazed at everything that goes on to get the show on the air. It's a lot.
Do you know what I'd like to see, Bill? And we were all guilty of this. I'd like to throw the average fan who likes to poke fun at the commentators and say, why would you say that? Chuck them in there. See how you go. Good luck. Hey?
Right. You're gonna have a lot of I mean, it's incredible how these talented guys have a producer in their ear and they are so smooth and we all make mistakes, but there really are few and far between, and it's a real skill. And these pros like Dan Hicks or Mike Tirico, Steve Sands, they all do a fantastic job.
Yeah, there's an electricity about that, bit like the old newsroom when a big news story happened and everybody was a part of. So everybody was assigned a portion of the story to work on. That's part of what you got, and there's an energy about that is collective and that you get swept up in. It's fun, it's exciting, it's nerve wracking, it's terrifying. And when you get it right and it's all done, it's when you go and have a drink because you've really earned it.
That's right. On a Sunday, a final round when it's all coming down, and it's close, and you give. In my role, if you give an announcer some good context or good information and they use it, it's satisfying. It's different from writing or editing or photography, but it's fun and it's a real collaborative effort.
Yeah, for them. I've often thought, Bill, the saddest place in the world is a course that's hosted a golf tournament on the Monday, because they start ripping down the grandstands and all the scaffolding and everything's being taken down. It's just a really sad kind of scene after all the excitement of the day before. It's Excuse
me.
Not at all. I'm going to let you go, Bill.
My voice is wearing out.
Yeah, well, I've kept you for too long, and so that's the universe's way of telling us that we must wrap up. It's been fabulous to chat to you. I really do appreciate it. I hope the listeners have listened. They should go and find you on Substack. I'm 100% recommending your newsletter. It is always fantastic. Whenever you've taken the time to put finger to keyboard, it's worth reading. So we thank you for taking the time today.
Rod, always a pleasure to be with you. Thanks for the conversation. Really enjoyed it.
Lots to chew on from that chat, and a big thanks to Bill again for taking the time to do it. As mentioned, you can find his work on Substack at his newsletter called The Albatross. Well, that might be it for episode 142, but you won't want to miss episode 143 either.
I don't think anyone on any side, or at least on the American side, would imagine what Rory, who we saw there. We knew he had ability, but what he's accomplished in a game of golf is historic.
That's 8-time PGA Tour winner and 2-time BMW PGA champion Billy Horschel sitting down with John Huggan next time on The Thing About Golf.